Guys, before I start, I want you to jot down these key moves. Number 1, we always want to play an early pawn to a3 given a chance in the opening stage. Number 2, our queen's knight will have to sit on f3 most of the times to defend our pawn on d4. And number 3, our king's knight will most of the time sit on g3. How? By playing knight e2 first, then knight g3 to challenge black's knight on f5. Because most of the times in the Caro-Kann defense and in the French defense, black players love putting their king's knight on f5 like this. This is what we are going to be doing most of the times in this simple repertoire, and you should get used to this, especially pawn to a3 very early in the opening stage. Done. Welcome to Casper Chess, where we force people to subscribe. Anyway, today's lesson is going to be interesting. Guys, I'm going to show you some new opening traps that you can try against Scandinavian players all around the world. So after e4, black plays pawn to d5, which is the Scandinavian defense. The most recommended move is e takes d5, and I don't have a problem with that. But that's what a Scandinavian player wants to see. Once you take on d5, you are now playing on black's terms. So instead of doing that, I want to introduce to you a new surprise weapon which begins with pawn to e5. Now I know some YouTubers and other chess content creators don't seem to like this move, but this can be okay if you know exactly what you are doing, which is what I want to show you in this video. So after this, the top played move is pawn to c5, after which I recommend you go pawn to c3 immediately. And this, ladies and gentlemen, will be our initial position, and these are the lines that we are going to look at in this particular video. From here, the game may transpose into the French defense or into the Caro-Kann defense, and you need to know what to do against that. So we begin with knight c6 first, attacking the e5 pawn. What do? Well, simple chess, you just go pawn to d4 right away, like you do in the French defense or in the Caro-Kann advanced variation. If black plays pawn to e6, you can just go knight to f3, and boom, you're back into the French defense. If cd, well, you can just take back, because what else? If bishop f5, the top played move, what I recommend is simple chess, guys. Like you do in the advanced Caro-Kann variation, just go for the bishop exchange. And here is our first trap, you guys. It looks like our pawn on d4 is just a free pawn, since we can't even go bishop b5 check because of this. And if bishop takes f5, the knight can easily take back. But it's not about the bishop, guys. It's about the queen. So queen to a4 check will surely win a free piece. If knight c6, you can just take that poor bishop and you're up a piece. So let's go back a few moves to see what can happen if black doesn't take with a knight. What if they take with a bishop? Or you can just take back. Now you will spend the rest of your opening stage controlling the d4 pawn. e6, knight f3, queen b6, castle shot. And now if knight b4 comes, almost anything is playable, but the best move here is queen e2. And now you have to get used to this knight maneuver which French players play. Beginning with knight e7, they want to plant their knight on f5. You can even play knight c3 here, so that after knight f5 you go either rook d1 or simply bishop e3 to guard your d4 pawn. Done. Still in the knight c6 line, there are times when black wishes to keep the position closed by not taking on d4 right away. Instead, they go bishop f5. But in this position, Stockfish likes dc, and that's okay. But I find bishop d3 to be a more human move, because this is what you do in the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann defense. Whenever black plays bishop f5, you want to get rid of it. You want to exchange bishops, right? So stick to what you know. If bishop takes, you simply take back, no problems. If pawn to e6, remember of the first key move that I asked you to keep in mind whenever you encounter the French defense. Pawn to a3 is what I would play here with no shame, but even knight to f3 is okay. I just love pawn to a3 because it kind of stops knight b4 in the near future, and also prepares for the move pawn to b4 to divert attention from the d4 pawn. For example, black may play queen b6 here, putting more pressure on the d4 pawn, so you need to add one more defender, which should be knight f3. But in this case, we want to keep an option of playing knight g3 in the near future to challenge black's knight on f5. So knight e2 makes a lot of sense. So if knight g e7, you know this knight is going to sit here. So this is when you remember to play our second key move, knight b f3. So you go knight b d2 first, and after knight f5, you can easily add another defender. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 attackers versus 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders. And see the beauty of playing pawn to a3 very early in the French defense, because even after this trade happens, black won't have knight b4. These are deep things that I'm showing you guys, which is why you should consider subscribing, because I put in so much effort researching all these things for you. Anyway, the next line is the d4 line. Again, you begin with pawn to e4. Then black plays the Scandinavian. Just go e5, surprising your opponent. And after pawn to c5, as usual, you just go pawn to c3. The whole idea, once again, is just to connect your center pawns so that you can have 3 pawns on the center and see whether black wants to go back to the French defense or maybe transpose the position back to the Caro-Kann. So instead of knight c6, this time black may play pawn to d4. You're going to see a lot of traps in this particular line, you guys. First of all, you can play knight to f3 if you want to. But speaking of simple chess, take the pawn, and if pawn takes, you now set your first little trap in this line with bishop b5 check. The top played move in the latest database is bishop d7, blocking the check, but this is when you can surprise them once again with the move pawn to e6. What the? I mean, if black takes your bishop thinking it is a free piece, there are 2 ways in which you can continue playing this position. You can either take on f7 first with check. Another way you can punish black is to go queen h5 first, threatening to checkmate black on f7. So pawn to g6 is the top played move, after which you can now go queen takes b5 check, and the only sensible move for black is knight c6, and this is when you take on f7 once again, making black lose his right to castle and continue developing like nothing happened. So the whole idea is just to make black lose his right to castle and take him out of prep for the time being. The only reason why I don't like this queen h5 line in the d4 line is that after you go queen h5, black doesn't have to play pawn to g6. They can simply go queen b6, protecting their bishop first. And remember that you are down a piece, so you have to get back your piece in this way with check. And after king c7, you now have to worry about this pawn on e6, which you can hardly defend. For example, if you go queen f4 check, black can simply go king c8 and you can hardly defend this pawn. So this is the reason why I don't like this queen h5 move. So whenever you reach this position, I propose you just take on f7 just to keep everything simple like this, so that you make black lose his right to castle and then you simplify the position. Now still in the d4 line of our anti-Scandinavian, where black plays pawn to d4 on move number 3, I said just keep it so simple by taking and then go bishop b5 check first. We saw how bad bishop d7 may be, but what if black plays knight c6? Again, keeping it so simple. You can just mess up black's pawn structure on the queen side, leave some highlighted weaknesses there, and then go knight to f3. What else? If bishop g4, they pin your knight, you have time to go pawn to d3. And look at this. After pawn to e6, you can simply castle short, and if they play knight e7, count how many weak squares that black has in his position. Next move will be knight c4 or knight e4 and you'll be all good. Let's say knight g6, you can even play queen a4 here and there's a problem, but not so fast. If we go back to move number 3, what if black doesn't take with the pawn? What if black takes with the queen? This is another line that you are going to see and you must be prepared. Well, you just go knight to f3, simple stuff. So they play bishop g4, or first of all give a check with their queen. So you can just block that, and after bishop g4, this is when you go knight c3. This is bad for black, and it's black who should be very careful in this position, because if they play the second most played move, queen c6 in this position, you can simply go bishop b5, pinning their queen to the king. Game over. And if let's say black plays queen f5, you can still go pawn to d4, connecting your pawns and also paving way for your dark squared bishop. If CD happens, you can first of all go queen a4 check and you're going to win back that pawn. If knight d7, I love taking on e4 with a knight because it creates an attack on black's queen. If queen takes e5, I can even castle short if I want to, or go pawn to f3 because I'm responding to the current situation. And instead of queen c6 or queen f5, if black plays queen b4, I can just go knight d5, and after queen a5, I simply go queen b3, threatening to take the pawn. Black has to undevelop his bishop to defend the b7 pawn. But if pawn to b6, I have knight c7 check, and I'll end up winning the rook. Now let's look at another line to do with bishop f5. So after e4, d5, e5, pawn to c5, c3, black may also play an early bishop f5 like they do in a Caro-Kann defense advanced variation. Remember, we just finished looking at knight c6 and pawn to d4 in this particular position. So what if black plays bishop f5? Same stuff, just go pawn to d4, and the top played move is pawn to e6, kind of the Carlsbad-Winnick Caro-Kann defense, where you still want to get rid of black's light squared bishop. If bishop takes, the game is well simplified. If knight c6, knight e2 or knight f3 is okay, but once again, you will never go wrong by playing this early pawn to a3, either in the French defense or in the advanced Caro-Kann, because you're just stopping knight b4. And if queen b6 comes, realizing this knight maneuver, which French players always take advantage of, or Caro-Kann players, this is when you want to develop your king's knight on g3 like this. Knight f5 will be met with knight bf3, like this, just like I said in the intro of this video, and this knight will be later on exchanged with your king's knight. For example, after bishop e7, you can play b4 if you want, castle shot on knight g3 to get rid of black's knight on f5. Done. But what if black doesn't take your bishop back on move 5 after e6 and bishop d3? They have this tendency of playing bishop g6. Bishop takes g6 is not good because you're going to help black open up the way for his rook. Besides, you don't have pawn to e6. So this is why you would love to play our very important move, pawn to a3, kind of a prophylactic move also. After knight c6, you simply go knight e2, queen b6, you cast short. Again, they will always play knight g e7, what else? But in this position, you even have time to play pawn to b4. If you look at it, trying to divert the attention, CD, CD, black can't even take on d4 by the way, because of knight takes and bishop b5 check later on. If knight f5 is played, putting more pressure on this pawn, well, you can even take that. And after bishop takes, you go knight bc3, everything is under control. Now we come to the last line where the game may transpose back into the French. e4, d5, e5, c5, then you still go pawn to c3. So this may happen if black plays pawn to e6 or even knight c6, just like I showed you. So whenever you see pawn to e6, just remember that this has now transposed back into the French defense advanced variation. Again, what I advise beginners and intermediate level players to do against the French defense is to develop these 4 pawns first. 1, 2, 3, 4. a3 is a very important move. Once again, preparing for pawn to b4, given a chance to divert attention and also just to prevent some knight b4 tactics. If queen b6, you now go knight to f3 back into the normal French defense. If they play bishop d7 like they do, you simply go pawn to b4 to divert attention. Once again, if knight g e7, you know they want to play knight f5, but you can still go pawn to b4 even in this position because this is too late. So if CD happens, you now take on d4 like this, so that knight f5 can be met with bishop b2 and you have no weaknesses. I forgot to cover one possible line that black may play. After e4, d5, and pawn to e5. Instead of pawn to c5, black can also play an early pawn to d4. In fact, this is the top played move in the latest database. Well, I wouldn't mind going pawn to c3 even in this position, because if dc happens, which is the top played move, taking with a pawn looks good to me, because if pawn to c5, I can simply go pawn to d4 and still connect my center pawns like this, and next I'll play knight to f3 and continue developing normally. But what if black doesn't take on c3 and let's say plays pawn? Well, once again, we're just back into the d4 line where I advised to keep it so simple, then go bishop b5 check. And remember, this is where we saw this little trap where you go pawn to e6. Did I say this is the perfect weapon against the Scandinavian defense? No, but it can be a surprise weapon to try and take a typical Scandinavian player into the lines that he is not familiar with, because you don't want to play what they know. Right, you guys, word of advice: to understand the opening that I just showed you very well, you also need to be studying how to play against the French defense and also the advanced Caro-Kann variation, just to be safe. So thank you for watching this video. Until next time, bye bye.